So recently, a friend of mine who happens to be a counselor was telling me of a couple who came in to see him. Now, as you would imagine, this couple was experiencing a difficult time and they needed to work a few of the issues they were having in their relationship. Now, one of the issues that the husband was dealing with was he's trying to work on his anger. And he noticed that whenever he and his wife were arguing, he would get absolutely irate, while she would remain incredibly calm. And this confused him. So during a counseling appointment, the husband brought it up and he asked his wife, "When I get mad at you, you never fight back. How do you control your anger?" The wife responded, "Well, I clean the toilet." The husband replied, "How does that help?" Then the wife said, "I use your toothbrush." Is that passive aggressive or what? You know the type of passive aggressive behavior that I really hate? The silent treatment. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? When someone's mad at or upset with you, and so they just stop talking. Now, what I hate about this is that you don't know what this person is trying to communicate to you. Are they angry with us? Are they trying to get our attention? Are they trying to control us in some way, to bend our will towards theirs? Or are they just testing us in some way? When someone we truly love is giving us a silent treatment, it is torture, absolute torture. Has there ever been a time, though, when you thought God was giving you the silent treatment? A time when you needed a God to show up in a big way? A time when you needed direction or answer to a pressing question? A season when you were confused or hurting and you needed some comforting? In that moment, I have a tendency to cry out for God, and maybe you do too. We wait, but what if nothing happens? That kind of silence is absolutely deafening. It is so loud. And it amplifies whatever struggle that we're going through. It makes it so much harder to deal with that situation in our life. Well, we see in Matthew chapter 27 that Jesus experienced something very similar when he was on the cross for us. And today we're going to look at that passage and perhaps apply a few of the principles to our life too. So as I read this, why don't you follow on the screen with me? The leading priests, the teachers of the law, and the older Jewish leaders were also there. They made fun of Jesus in the same ways that other people did. They said, "He saved others, but he can't save himself. People say he's the king of Israel. If he is the king, he should come down from the cross. Then we will believe in him. He trusted God, so let God save him now, if God really wants him. He said, 'I am the Son of God.'" And in the same way, the criminals on the crosses beside Jesus also insulted him. At noon, the whole country became dark. The darkness continued for 3 hours. About 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out loudly, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you abandoned me? Why have you left me here alone?" And some of the people standing there heard this. They said, "Hey, he's calling Elijah." Quickly, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled that sponge with sour wine, and he tied the sponge to a stick. Then he used the stick to give the sponge to Jesus to get a drink from it. But the others said, "Don't bother him. We want to see if Elijah comes down to save him." And again, Jesus cried out loudly, and then he died. So what do we need to remember when God seems silent or distant? Well, the first thing we need to consider is silence does not mean that God is absent. And this is so important for us to remember, because I don't know about you, but there are times when I believe that God is being passive aggressive towards me, that he's trying to punish me, that he's trying to get my attention, that he's playing some kind of cosmic, cruel joke on me, or even testing me at times. So in those moments, I have actually said, "Okay, God, two can play that game. If you're going to mess with me, I'll start messing with you." So I engaged in my favorite sin, my destructive behaviors, and I ended up hurting a lot of people around me, including myself. And in the end, I was just inflicting all these wounds on people because I was trying to get God's attention. I was trying to prove something to him. "Okay, God, you don't care about me enough to let me know that you're with me, that you're here right now? I'll just stop going to church. I'll engage in some unhealthy relationship. I'll start drinking too much again. In fact, I'll just do whatever I want." This is why God reminds us in Joshua 1:9, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." The Lord your God is with you wherever you go. When God seems distant, when God seems silent, when we are hurting, confused, lonely, even scared, in those moments, I can't trust my feelings. My emotions cloud my judgment. In those moments, my feelings lead me some pretty bad places, into some pretty bad decisions. In those moments, I have to trust in God who does not lie. I have to trust that he promised me that he is with me wherever I go. Now, it's much easier to trust God that he hasn't abandoned us if we remember a few other things. Like silence creates a desire for God. Silence creates a desire for God. Think about somebody you truly love. Now, what if they went away for a week or 10 days? Now, I don't know about you, but after day 2 or 3 into that trip, I want them back in town and close with me. I have this uncontrollable desire to be near them. And this is exactly what Jesus was experiencing when he was on that cross and he cried out to God the Father, "Why have you forsaken me?" I mean, Jesus knew the plan. He knew that he was going to die. He knew that he had to take on and pay for every sin that anybody would ever commit towards God. He knew that God the Father, who is perfect, hates sin and had to turn his back in sheer disgust to what was happening in that moment, even though he loves Jesus. And Jesus knew that this was temporary. This was only going to be a 3-day trip. He was going to rise from the dead and be with God the Father once again. But that was way too long. So Jesus cries out and says, "Why have you forsaken me, God? Father, where are you right now? Why have you abandoned me?" Which is another way of saying, "Father, I want you close again. Father, I need you near me again." Jesus applies this to our life in Matthew chapter 5, verse 6. "Happy are those whose greatest desire is to do what God requires. God will satisfy them fully." Happy are those whose greatest desire is to be close with God. You may be here today and you would describe yourself as a spiritual seeker. You've been coming to church for a while and you've noticed that the Bible really is practical to your everyday life, that it really does make sense. You've enjoyed the people of hope, and church is not as scary or weird as you thought it once was. And your experience has actually created this deeper desire to know more about God. Don't ignore that desire. Don't ignore those feelings. In fact, I would encourage you to look into a series that we call The Basics. It's designed for people just like you to help you understand what it means to be a follower of Christ. In this group, you can ask the hard questions you've always wanted to know. And if we don't have the answers, I bet the person facilitating that group will do their best to find it. Now, being in a group is a little intimidating for you. The cool thing about what we do here at Hope is that we also have one-on-one people that you can meet with over a period of time and go through the same material, ask the same questions without the pressure of being in a group. The next series starts April 12th. And I really want to encourage you, if you are truly seeking, even if you're skeptical, it's one thing to say, "I don't believe in God." It's another thing to say, "I know what I don't believe in." Go through this series. Just fill out a comment card, either the one that in the bulletin, you can put it at the information desk, or pull out your app and say, "Let me know more about the basics," and we will help you get connected. Now, if you consider yourself a Christ follower, this desire doesn't always go away. There are times in which we want to go deeper in our relationship with him, that we want to know more about Jesus. The best way that I found out is to join a group. I'm in a group, and I tell you what, this is the place where I actually learn. This is the place where I can ask hard questions about the Bible and about Jesus. And this is where people surround me and help me apply what I'm learning to my everyday life. Not as a pastor, but as a person. They help me apply these things to my life as a husband and father, employee, a friend, a neighbor, and the list goes on and on. In a group is where you find depth. And if you want to go deeper with God, you need to join a group. Now, I know that's a big step for a lot of us. We think we're too busy, but really, are we too busy to go deeper with the Lord? Are we really too busy for that? If you're ready to take that step, again, do the same thing. pull out your comment card in your app or in your bulletin and say, please help me find a group, and I promise you, we will get back with you very quickly. So silence creates a desire for God, but silence also encourages us to listen and learn. Let's see what Psalms 32 says. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. Be not like a horse or a mule without understanding, which must be curbed with a bit and bridle, or it will not stay near you. Okay, I'm a workaholic. It's hard for me to admit that, but I am. I love what I do here at the church. I love helping people. I love talking to couples. I love working with families, but I'm a workaholic. I know it. My wife knows it. My kids know it. My friends know it. Some of my coworkers realize it, that I struggle not with what I do, but thinking about my work way too much. Here's the deal, though. I get a real thrill out of achieving. In fact, every morning, I get to my office and I write a to-do list. Maybe you're like that too, right? And I get a rush every time I get to check off another thing off that list for the day. Now, there's some times that I forget to put something on my list and I do it anyway. And I write it down after I've already done it just so I could check it off. I mean, how sick is that? I mean, that is so weird. And, but it's the rush. I love to achieve things, but my work as a result sometimes can consume me. A couple of months ago, I was getting consumed by work. And I was praying, asking God for direction and wisdom to help me reach these goals or do these things that were really near and dear to my heart. I was really doing super spiritual prayers, like God would really listen to me more if I said the thous and the these and all that kind of stuff. And use me as a vessel, O Lord, for thou purposes, you know. Hopefully that God would listen a little closer, but he didn't. But if I were honest, that was a very selfish prayer. What I wanted them to know, what I was really praying for is, God, I want to rush. I want that feeling of accomplishment. I want to have that feeling that I've done something well. And my wife started to notice and tried to help me create a little more balance in my life. My kids started to notice and saying things like, Dad, you brought homework again today? Or Dad, you're going in early again today? And I would just reassure them that this was just a season. I just needed to finish a few things and everything would be back to normal very, very soon. But to be honest, during that whole time, I was also getting very upset with God because God was not answering my prayers. He was not working fast enough for me. And I started to think that if God just did what I asked in the timing that I asked him to do it in, I wouldn't be so stressed or overwhelmed. God, it's your fault my family misses me. Get to work, man. And I thought that God was just being silent, that he was ignoring me. That was about the same time we were in the Simple series earlier this year. And one Sunday, Rufus preached a sermon on work as part of that series. And I was sitting right there with my family and a few of my friends, listening to this sermon, thinking of all the people I wish I would have invited to church to hear that sermon that day. But guess who wasn't on that list? This guy. I was totally ignoring God's message to me. And after that message, a few of our friends were hanging in the lobby. And one of them came up to me and she said, I hope you were listening today, Freddie, because that sermon had your name written all over it. I was asking a question that God seemed not to answer. He seemed to be silent, but it didn't mean that God was not speaking to me. My friends, my family, my coworkers heard. I even heard this in a sermon. It was like somebody was reading my mails, like somebody was peeking into my private life, and still I was ignoring it. God was speaking. God was teaching, but I didn't want to learn what he had for me. The same was true for the people that were making fun of Jesus while he hung on that cross. Hey, if you're really the Son of God, come on down. We'll believe this time if you do just one more trick for us. Do one more miracle. Do one more thing, and we promise that will prove it. You will be God's Son in our eyes. We will believe. We will have faith. Just do one more thing, Jesus. And I can imagine what Jesus must have been thinking in that moment. You don't want me to come off this cross. If I come off this cross, you have no hope. If I come off this cross, you have no chance for a life of meaning and purpose. If I come off this cross, you cannot have a relationship with God. You cannot have that void filled in your life. If I come off this cross, you can never hear from me again. You will be lonely and alone. How about you? Is God trying to teach you something? Maybe something about an unhealthy relationship. Maybe God is trying to teach you patience. Maybe somebody you need to forgive. Maybe you're struggling with anger or another kind of addiction or some deep struggle that you just don't want to let go of because it's just way too comfortable. Are you listening? Are you listening? The final thing we should probably remember is silence is an opportunity to focus on others. Many times God is silent because it's not a time to get answers, but it's time to give back. When God the Father was silent, it gave Jesus the opportunity to completely focus on people like me and you. He took on our sin. He took the punishment that we should have taken. He was willing for God the Father to be distant and silent, to endure the feeling that he had been abandoned so we would never have to feel that in our lives. Notice what Hebrews 13 says. This is God speaking to us. Because of Jesus, God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. So we can say with confidence, the Lord is my helper, I will not be afraid. Because of Jesus, we will never have to say, Father, why have you forsaken me? Because of his willing to endure that silence, we can be like him and focus on others. So when God seems silent in our lives, look around and see who else needs to hear from God. And right now, I'm hoping you're thinking about a few people who really need to hear from God, who have a lot of hard questions for him. We use this acronym called HAND. These are just simple cues for us to remember to share our church as a way to share our faith when we hear certain things. When you hear somebody who's hurting, say, God, I don't know why I just had this breakup. Why are they getting married? What do they have that I don't have? When they're going through hard times, you extend a hand and said, you know what, you should come to our church. When people are asking questions like, is this God thing really real? And where can I find the answers? When people are saying, this is my first baby, and I don't know what to do. When people are asking, is there any way that I can have hope for my marriage? You extend a hand. Said, you should try to my church. When people are new to the community, and we kind of live in an international city. I mean, International Paper and FedEx bring people from all around the country and even all around the world. And a lot of folks have a hard time finding their place in our city. When you run across those people in your workplace or even in your neighborhood or community, and they're having a hard time finding friends, you extend a hand to them. You say, hey, I would love to show you my church. They're very friendly. And we know people who for some reason have disengaged from church. They might think that God is being passive aggressive with them, that God is just being cruel or mean during a time that they're in desperate need. So they said, okay, God, till you can play that game, I'll just stop going to church. They need somebody to extend a hand to them and say, you know what, I've been there, and I found some hope, and I'd love to share it with you. See, we have been through similar struggles. We have asked similar questions, and you and I are the perfect person to reach out to those kind of folks. And Easter is the perfect time for us to ask them to join us. Who in your life needs a little hope? Who in your life needs to experience Jesus? Eli showed us these things during the announcement. These are simple invitation cards. Now, we don't want you to rip these off and give them to your server at the restaurant. We want you to extend an invitation to people you actually know, to extend a hand to people who need to experience Jesus and who need to experience hope. Now, when you do this, I would encourage you to invite them to join you. Don't just say, hey, come to one of our services. Say, why don't you come and sit with me? Maybe after church we'll get brunch or lunch. Maybe you'll come over to our home and we can share a meal together. Start extending a hand. Start extending God's love to people you know, because for a lot of folks just like us, God seems silent right now. And Easter is the perfect time for us to re-engage them. So that's the point today. Does God seem silent to you? If he does, it doesn't mean that he's not there. It doesn't mean that he's not working. It might mean he's trying to create a deeper desire for him. It might mean you need to listen and learn. It might mean that we need to focus on others. I would encourage you to think about those things today. Would you please pray with me?